There are moments that change everything, not because of what they show, but because of what they should have shown sooner. When Officer Bentley sat down in the dusty back room of the Ridgefield Police Department, he wasn't expecting anything. The tapes were old, pulled from a broken security camera, mounted near the high school's back lot. No one had even noticed it before. It had been half covered in ivy, overlooked during the initial investigation. But Emily Carter had insisted. She kept coming back every week, demanding that they check every angle, every camera, every second. And today, Officer Bentley, more out of pity than belief, decided to humor her. He didn't expect the silence to break the way it did, and yet, there it was, the van. It wasn't just that the footage showed the 5 boys. That much had been established from the start. Everyone had seen them leaving the gym after the big win. They were laughing, arms over shoulders, high on adrenaline and victory. But in the grainy black and white feed, there was something else. A shape, a 6th figure, barely visible in the dim lighting. It wasn't walking like the others. It moved slowly, almost mechanically. The frame froze as the figure turned its head directly into the camera. Bentley leaned forward. The face was blurred, undefined, but the feeling it gave him was undeniable. He felt cold. The original report stated the boys had left together in a borrowed van and were never seen again. No signs of struggle, no wreckage, no calls, no texts, just gone. 17 weeks had passed. Their names were candles burned down to memory. Josh Carter, Brandon Mears, Tyler Holt, Eli Sanchez, and Chris Boone. And now, a shape, a detail missed, was staring back through the monitor, taunting all of them. Officer Bentley didn't move for a long time. He just sat there, eyes locked, knowing everything was about to be dragged back into the light. Emily had warned them. Again and again, she insisted something had been overlooked. She wasn't some paranoid teenager. She was methodical, relentless. She kept a journal of every lead, every conversation, every denial she received. The officers rolled their eyes behind her back. They called her the sister, as if her name didn't matter. But she wasn't asking anymore. She was demanding. That persistence had brought them here, to this room, to this footage, to the moment that would become the point of no return. The camera didn't record sound, but you could hear the silence anyway. It was in the way the boys moved, carefree, unknowing. They had no idea that their final moments on public record would be through a broken lens. The van door slid open, and they climbed. In one by one, Josh clapped Brandon on the back. Eli jumped into the front seat. Chris tossed something onto the dashboard. Tyler laughed, turning back to shout something toward the building. And then, just before the door slid shut, the 6th figure stepped up behind them. Nobody looked back. Nobody saw, but the camera did. Officer Bentley printed the still, the blur of a face. He placed it in a folder marked Evidence, New Submission. Then he paused. He didn't know why, but he turned the page over and wrote something on the back. They weren't alone. He stared at those words for a long time. It wasn't protocol, it wasn't scientific, but it was the truth. And now that truth was going to tear open everything they thought they knew about that night. There was a storm coming, and it had been waiting for 17 weeks to be seen. The station buzzed with activity once the footage was revealed. The chief was called in, and the FBI liaison was reactivated. "We may have missed something," they said on the call. But it wasn't just something, it was everything. The entire timeline had to be reevaluated. And more importantly, the van. Where had it gone? Why wasn't there any record of it? Past the exit gate. Emily had said it from day one. That van didn't just disappear. Someone made it disappear. For the first time, they began to believe her. Back at her house, Emily sat alone, staring at the call log. Her phone hadn't rung yet. She knew they'd found something. She could feel it. 17 weeks of knocking on doors, putting up posters and screaming into the void had sharpened her instincts. When it rang, she didn't answer right away. She just let it ring once, twice, 3 times, like a dare. When she finally picked up, her voice didn't tremble. "What did you see?" she asked Officer Bentley didn't hesitate. There was someone else. Silence on both ends. Then Emily whispered, I knew it. The footage hit the press in less than 24 hours, despite the department trying to hold it back. It was leaked. No one knew by who. But it didn't matter. The city woke up to a new headline. Was there a sixth person? Panic returned. Parents clutched their children tighter. Teachers avoided the topic. The school issued a vague statement about cooperating with authorities. But for the Carter family and the families of the others, this was validation. The pain they'd swallowed was now public, their grief no longer quiet. And for Emily, it was just the beginning. Online forums reignited, Reddit threads reopened, theories spiraled, cult activity, human trafficking, a rogue teacher. Some even claimed it was a ghost, but Emily ignored them all. She knew real. Monsters didn't hide in shadows. They wore name tags. They waved at neighbors. They drove vans. She printed the still image from the footage and pinned it above her desk. The figure, blurry and featureless, stared back at her like a dare. I'll find you, she whispered. Not because she needed justice, but because she needed it to end. She needed to sleep again, to breathe. The final moment of the tape, seconds before the van pulled away, showed something small. A light from inside the van, blinking rapidly. 3 flashes. Pause. 3 more. It meant nothing to most. But Emily recognized it. It was a signal, Morse code. Her brother had learned it when they were kids. He used to flash it at her window when sneaking out. 3 short bursts. S. 3 again. S. A silent scream for help. Emily's heart sank. He had tried. Even then, he had tried. And now she would answer. Even if no one else would. Emily Carter had learned early in life that waiting gets you nowhere. When Josh didn't come home that night, when her mother paced the hallway whispering, maybe they went somewhere, Emily didn't wait. She called every friend. She texted every number in his phone. She drove to Brandon's house at 3 a.m. and knocked until someone answered. She wasn't hysterical. She was sharp, focused. That's how she'd always been. While everyone else said, give it time, she knew that time wasn't a gift. It was a weapon. The longer they waited, the colder the trail would get. She didn't cry at the first police interview. She didn't break when the press started using words like runaways and troubled teens. What broke her was the silence, the deliberate, suffocating silence of people who were supposed to care. Teachers who sent their thoughts and prayers but wouldn't meet her eyes. Cops who nodded at her questions and then filed them away. It was like everyone agreed, without saying it, that the boys had done something wrong, that they weren't worth looking for. Emily saw it clearly. They were being erased. Her brother Josh wasn't reckless. He wasn't the type to disappear for fun. He was the one who reminded everyone to text when they got home safe. He was the one who checked in when someone didn't show up to class. He played small forward on the basketball team and worked weekends at the diner. He wanted to go to community college, maybe major in criminal justice. I want to know how things go wrong, he once said. That sentence played over in Emily's mind like a loop. Now he was the one gone wrong, and she was left behind to piece it together. In the days after the disappearance, Emily transformed their garage into a command center. Maps, photos, and receipts lined the walls. She logged every sighting, every call, even the prank ones. She interviewed classmates, took notes during school board meetings, and recorded conversations with officers without telling them. Some thought she was losing it. Her mom begged her to stop, to rest, to grieve. But Emily refused. Grieving meant accepting he was gone. And she couldn't do that, not without proof, not while the world kept telling her to move on. When she found the receipt for a gas station 30 miles out of town, dated the night of the game, time-stamped at 10:47 p.m., she drove there herself. The clerk barely remembered. The boys. But when Emily asked about security footage, he hesitated. That's handled by corporate, he said. No access here. She left her number anyway. 2 weeks later, she got a call from an anonymous number. No one spoke, but the footage arrived in her inbox an hour later. It showed the van. Pulling in, but only 4 boys got out. 1 stayed behind. The 5th never appeared. That footage wasn't conclusive. It didn't show anything criminal, but it showed gaps, questions. Emily brought it to the police. They said it was interesting, but not enough to reopen anything. You need something. And concrete, they told her. Bodies, blood. She walked out mid-sentence. Concrete, she thought, was something you poured over the truth when you didn't want to dig. She began compiling her own file, labeling everything by hand. Witness statements, timelines, screenshots. She called it the ledger. It became her gospel. Her obsession cost her. Friends stopped inviting her places. Teachers marked her late even when she was on time. Her mum withdrew. "This isn't helping," she said once, gesturing at the wall of theories and photos. "It's just hurting." Emily wanted to scream. She didn't understand how doing nothing was supposed to hurt less. Her mom didn't know about the journal Josh had hidden in the attic, the one Emily found by accident weeks after the disappearance. Its final page was a scrawl, a sentence repeated 3 times. "Something's wrong with Coach." That sentence changed everything. It wasn't just grief anymore, it was a trail, and Emily followed it. She began looking into Coach Daniels, reviewing team schedules, cross-referencing missing persons. Daniels had left his last school under murky circumstances, but nothing stuck. Still, Emily kept digging. The deeper she went, the more inconsistencies she found. Attendance records changed after the fact. Travel logs didn't match gas purchases, and at least 2 parents refused to talk about him at all. The silence around him was louder than any denial. Then came the anonymous letter. No return address. Just a scrap of notebook paper with one line, "Ask about the van before Ridgewood." It didn't make sense at first. But when Emily traced the team's travel history, she found a tournament in Ridgewood 3 months prior. The same van had been used. No incident was ever reported, but a substitute. A player named Evan Hall had dropped out of school days after. When Emily called his family, they hung up. When she drove to their house, it was empty. Windows boarded, abandoned, another hole in the timeline, another ghost. Emily sat on her bed that night, staring at the pinboard. 5 faces. 1 van. 1 night. But now patterns were emerging. Repetitions, names, places, and no one, absolutely no one, was putting it together except her. She wasn't a detective, she wasn't trained, but she had something they didn't. She had skin in the game. Blood, family. She whispered to the board like a prayer, "I'm not letting go, not until I bring you home." And in that moment, she wasn't broken. She was forged. The night of the game felt like any other. It was the kind of evening that small-town kids looked forward to all week. The Ridgefield Panthers were playing their rivals, the Eastbrook Hawks, and the stands were packed. Parents filled the bleachers with foam fingers and homemade signs. Teachers stood by the gym doors, pretending to monitor but mostly cheering. And in the center of it all were the 5, Josh, Brandon, Tyler, Eli, and Chris. They were loud, confident, the pulse of the court. To anyone watching, they looked untouchable, young kings in flannel and sneakers. Josh scored the final 3-pointer that sealed the win. The crowd exploded. Someone lit a flare in the parking lot. It was all adrenaline and laughter. That's what made it so hard to believe later when the headlines changed their names into cautionary tales. That night, they were heroes. Josh ran up the bleachers after the buzzer, lifting Emily off the ground in a bear hug. "We did it!" he shouted, spinning her once before dropping her with a grin. She didn't know it would be the last time she felt his arms around her. No one did. They stayed behind after the crowd thinned out. Brandon had snagged a box of leftover nachos from the snack stand. Eli tried and failed to start a chant for a post-game burger run. Tyler was texting someone, grinning to himself. Chris kept tossing a basketball in the air like he couldn't let go of the moment. Coach Daniels had already left. The janitor mopped around them, grumbling. It was almost 10 p.m. when they finally headed out the back exit of the gym where the borrowed van waited. No one thought to question why it was parked so far from the rest. There's a photo from that moment. Emily took it before saying goodbye. The five of them, arms over shoulders, heads thrown back in laughter. The kind of photo that becomes unbearable to look at after everything changes. In the background, half-cropped, a blurry figure is visible. No one paid attention at the time, just some random guy walking past the parking lot. But now, with everything that's come out, that figure takes on a new weight. He wasn't laughing, he wasn't looking ahead, he was looking directly at them. The van belonged to Tyler's dad. He lent it out reluctantly after being convinced it was just for one night. Tyler promised to be careful. The van wasn't fancy, just a rusted-out Chevy, with an old air freshener and no working radio. But it was freedom, the kind of thing that made 5 high school seniors feel like they owned the night. They climbed in, still buzzing from victory. The plan was to hit Lou's diner, then maybe a movie, maybe a party. No one agreed. They figured they'd decide on the road. That road, as it turned out, led nowhere. Emily remembers Josh saying something strange before leaving. She didn't think much of it at the time. He gave her a long look and said, "Don't let them say we messed up. We didn't." She laughed, brushing it off. "You won the game," she said. "What could go wrong?" But he just nodded, quiet, like he knew something was coming, like he felt a tremor in the ground that hadn't reached anyone else yet. In hindsight, those words were the first crack in the timeline, the first sign that something was off. At 10:32 p.m., the van pulled out of the school lot. The last ping from Josh's phone was logged at 10:37 heading west. From there, the trail vanished. No more signals, no toll booth footage, no confirmed sightings. The route they should have taken was a straight line to the diner, but they never showed up. No tire marks, no accident. It was as if the van and everyone inside it dissolved into thin air. And for weeks, that's exactly what people believed. An open-ended mystery with no clues. Until Emily started to see the pattern. She remembered something odd. Josh had called her earlier that week, asking if she'd heard anything strange about Coach Daniels. She said no, and he dropped it, but he sounded unsettled. She thought maybe it was about the game, pressure, college scouts. Now that call felt different, urgent, like he was building up to something. Emily pulled her journals back out and reread everything. Every quote, every interaction. There were other moments. Eli joking about weird locker room schedules. Brandon complaining about late-night practices that weren't on the calendar. She had missed them. They all had. Back at the school, no one wanted to talk. Teachers said they didn't remember. Teammates gave short answers. They were just being dumb, one said. Probably got lost. But Emily pressed. She found out that a different group of students, 2 boys and a girl, had seen the van pull off the highway exit that didn't lead to Lou's diner. It led toward the old quarry road. Shortcut, they assumed, but that road had been closed for years. There was someone else in that van, the girl said, almost too quiet to hear. "I saw someone in the back, I swear." Emily circled the date on her board. Friday, November 11th. Just another normal Friday night. That's what everyone kept saying. That's what the school wrote in the memorial pamphlet later. But for Emily, nothing about that night was normal. Not the van, not the call, not the silence that followed. That night was a trap, one that only 5 people walked into, and someone made sure they never walked out. The morning after the game, Ridgefield felt unchanged. Birds chirped, lawn sprinklers kicked on at their programmed intervals. Parents read the paper over coffee. No one knew that 5 boys had disappeared. Not yet. For the Carters, the first sign was silence. Emily woke up and checked her phone. Instinctively, no new texts from Josh. That wasn't like him. He always sent a made-it-home message after late nights. She brushed it off, assuming he'd crashed at Brandon's or maybe left his phone on silent. But as the minutes ticked by and the morning turned to noon, concern crept in. By midday, Emily's worry became action. She called Josh's phone twice. No answer. Texted, nothing. She messaged Brandon's number, no reply. Then Tyler, Eli, Chris, not one response. She walked down the hall to Josh's room and opened the door. The bed hadn't been slept in. His hoodie from the game was still tossed over the chair. The panic didn't come all at once. It arrived in stages. She asked her mom if she'd heard from him. She hadn't. She called Brandon's mom, who sounded groggy and confused. "They're not back yet?" she asked. "They were just going to lose." By late afternoon, the families had begun calling each other. The conversations were short, tense, filled with, "I thought they were with you," and "maybe they're just sleeping it off." But underneath, a current of dread was building. None of the boys had checked in. None of them had come home. Tyler's dad realized his van was also missing. That changed the tone immediately. Now it wasn't just 5 boys being irresponsible. It was property missing. It was a vehicle unaccounted for. The calls to the police started just after 4 p.m. "They never came home," they said. All 5 of them. The police response was standard, almost rehearsed. "They're probably just blowing off steam," said the officer. "Happens all the time." Emily was there for that call, standing beside her mother. She could feel the coldness in the words, the way it dismissed their fear like it was teenage overreaction. "They're not runaways," Emily said, sharply. "Something is wrong." But the officer didn't budge. "Give it 24 hours. If they're not back by then, call again." Emily's hands curled into fists. That phrase, "give it time," was becoming poison. That night, the silence became unbearable. The Carters didn't eat dinner. They sat in the living room, phones clutched, TV on but muted. Emily kept checking Josh's location. Nothing. His icon had vanished from their shared app. That had never happened before. She went to her laptop and pulled up old GPS logs. His last location was near the school, then a single ping on the highway. Then nothing, no stops, no route continuation. Like the phone had shut off mid-drive, she stared at the screen for hours, refreshing, hoping for a new signal. It never came. At the same time, Tyler's dad drove around town searching. He hit up gas stations, parking lots, the outskirts near the old quarry. He called every one of Tyler's friends. No one had heard from them. "It's not like them," he kept saying. "It's not like them." When the police finally agreed to send out a patrol around midnight, they checked Lou's diner, closed early due to staffing. The lot was empty. No van, no tire marks, nothing. Emily rode her bike to the school in the cold, standing at the exact spot where they had last been seen. She waited. No one came. The next day, the school issued a short announcement. 5 students are currently unaccounted for after last night's game. Authorities are looking into the matter. We ask that you respect the family's privacy. That was it. No mention of names, no call to action, no urgency. Emily ripped the printed note off the bulletin board and threw it on the ground. "Unaccounted for," she muttered, as if they'd just wandered off, as if they'd just slipped through cracks in the pavement. She walked the perimeter of the school, looking for cameras, anything that might have caught what really happened. That's when she noticed the broken security camera near the back lot, half covered in ivy, angled wrong. It hadn't been working in months, according to the janitor, but something about it pulled at her. She took a photo and wrote a note to herself. "Check if data is still stored locally." That was the first breadcrumb that would eventually lead to the footage discovered weeks later. But at that point, she had no proof, just instincts, and instincts, and didn't matter to the police. They needed evidence, bodies, blood, something they could hold. Emily only had silence. That weekend, the media caught wind of the story. At first it was local, then regional. Photos of the boys from the game began circulating online. Smiling faces, headlines, speculating everything from foul play to drug use to teenage rebellion. None of it sat right. Emily watched interviews with classmates who barely knew her brother talk like they were best friends. Theories bloomed like weeds. Maybe they ran off together. Maybe it was a prank gone wrong. The truth was too hard for most people to face. It was easier to believe in accident or abandonment than in something darker. Emily shut out the noise. She printed a timeline. Last seen, 10:32 p.m. Final phone ping, 10:37 p.m. Confirmed route, unknown. She made a list of places the van could have gone. Abandoned roads, forest trails, service entrances. She knew her brother wouldn't just vanish. He wouldn't just stop calling. And she kept thinking about that last thing he said, "Don't let them say we messed up." It echoed in her head like a warning, like a promise. And as the town began to move on, Emily doubled down. If no one was going to find them, she would. The fifth day without Josh was when Emily realized that if she didn't move fast, the story would die. Media coverage had already started shifting to other headlines. The police issued another hollow statement about continuing the investigation and pursuing all leads. But Emily knew what that meant. They had nothing. No footprints, no vehicle, no evidence of foul play. Just 5 missing boys and a van that may as well have driven off the edge of the earth. Her mother sat at the kitchen table like a ghost, phone in hand, waiting for a call that never came. Emily, meanwhile, went looking for what the cops had missed. It started with something small, too small, really, to be called a clue. A bag. Josh's old black drawstring gym bag. Emily found it stuffed behind a row of metal lockers in the school's boys' locker room. She wasn't supposed to be there, but after days of dead ends, rules didn't apply anymore. The janitor had seen her enter but didn't stop her. Maybe he pitied her. Maybe he was just tired. Either way, when she unzipped the bag, she wasn't expecting anything significant. Just gym clothes, maybe a water bottle. But inside, she found Josh's phone. The discovery hit her like a punch. Josh never left his phone behind. It was practically part of his body. The cops had told her the phone had stopped pinging at 10:37 p.m. That timestamp had haunted her, the moment the van supposedly disappeared. But if the phone never left the locker room, what was pinging that location? Her hands trembled as she turned it on. Dead. She sat down on the bench, heart hammering, and dug through her backpack for her power bank. When the screen finally lit up, it asked for a passcode. She typed in Josh's birthday. The phone unlocked. Most of the texts were benign, group chats, memes, basketball strategy notes. But the voice memos app caught her attention. Josh used it sometimes to record ideas, jokes, even school assignments. The most recent file was labeled only with a date, 11/11/22, the night of the game. She hit play. The recording was grainy, filled with ambient static. For the first 10 seconds, nothing. Then footsteps, rapid, uneven, breathing. Not normal breathing, panicked, shallow. A sharp turn, the sound of fabric brushing against metal. And then a whisper, clear, urgent. "Don't let him see you." Emily froze. The voice was unmistakably Josh's. He was scared, terrified. She replayed the clip, trying to hear more. But that was it. No context, no other voices. Just that single line hanging in the air like a warning. She copied the file onto her own phone, heart racing. That whisper was all the proof she needed. Josh knew something was wrong. He saw someone or something and had the presence of mind to record it. And yet no one had found this. Not the police, not the school, no one. She took the phone to the station the next morning. Officer Benley was the only one who even looked her in the eye. She explained everything, where she found it, what it contained, how the phone contradicts the supposed timeline. He nodded slowly, took notes, promised to submit it as new evidence. But Emily knew that look. He didn't believe her, or maybe he did, but didn't think it mattered. Either way, the report would be filed, buried, forgotten. That night, Emily made a choice. She wouldn't hand anything else over. If she was going to get answers, she'd have to go around the system. That same night, she uploaded the audio to a small subreddit dedicated to cold cases. She posted under a throwaway username, explained the situation in vague terms, and asked if anyone could enhance the audio. Within hours, replies started flooding in. One user cleaned it up, boosting the background levels. In the new version, a second sound was barely audible, a clicking noise, mechanical, rhythmic. Another user suggested it sounded like a camera shutter. That word camera hit Emily like lightning. Was someone filming them? She returned to the locker room the next day, this time with gloves and a flashlight. She scoured every inch of the space where she found the bag. Nothing at first. But then, above the lockers, wedged between the metal slats, a plastic lens, small, circular, hidden. She climbed up and pulled it out. It was a micro camera, the kind used for covert surveillance. The brand wasn't familiar, but the fact that it was there said everything. Someone had been watching. Someone had eyes inside the school. Emily couldn't tell her mother, not yet. The weight of what she was learning was too big, too dangerous. Instead, she locked the camera and Josh's phone in a box under her bed. She began mapping out who had access to that locker room, who had keys, who had reasons to cover their tracks. The school janitor, coaches, staff, but the camera's position above Josh's locker felt too specific to be random. Someone had wanted to watch him, to track him. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that Josh hadn't just been a victim. He'd been a target. That realization haunted her. If someone had been watching, if someone had planted a camera, then this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a random disappearance. It was planned, coordinated. Josh had known, even if he didn't fully understand. That final whisper, "Don't let him see you," wasn't about being lost. It was about being hunted. And now Emily was the only one who knew, the only one willing to dig deeper. She sat on the floor of her room, phone in hand, eyes on the glowing map of Ridgefield. Somewhere out there, someone had answers, and she was going to find them. The map had been sitting on Emily's wall for weeks, marked with pins and circles, forming a pattern only she seemed to see. Every location mattered: the school, the gas station, the game. And now, a strange rural spot far outside the usual paths. The clue had come unexpectedly, from a friend of Josh's named Carter Mays, who had barely spoken to her since the boys went missing. He showed up at her house looking nervous, fidgeting with the sleeves of his hoodie. "I remembered something," he said, not meeting her eyes. "They mentioned taking a different road, said it would be faster." When she asked which road, he pointed to a winding route that led toward an overgrown service trail near the forest. That was where she started. Emily knew she couldn't go alone. She needed help, but not from the police. She turned to Mason, the only person she trusted fully. He was her neighbor, growing up, a tech-savvy introvert who now ran a conspiracy podcast out of his basement. To most people, he was weird. To Emily, he was useful. When she told him about the footage, the phone, the camera in the locker room, he didn't ask if it was real. He just asked, "When do we go?" The next morning, they packed 2 backpacks, flashlights, gloves, a basic first aid kit, water and pepper spray. Emily didn't tell her mum where she was going. She'd stopped explaining things weeks ago. The trail Carter had mentioned wasn't visible from the main road. They had to park a mile out and hike through brush and uneven dirt. It was colder than expected, and the wind howled through the trees like it was trying to speak. Mason led with a GPS tracker, cross-referencing satellite maps and old forestry surveys. After 2 hours of walking, they found it, an old turnoff hidden behind a collapsed gate, half swallowed by vines. "No one's been out here in years," Mason muttered. Emily stepped through the barrier, heart pounding. Somewhere up this road, she believed, was the truth. It didn't take long to find the van. It sat at an angle between trees covered in moss and pine needles. The windows were shattered, and the doors were closed but not locked. Emily froze. This wasn't an active crime scene. It was a graveyard. The vehicle had been abandoned deliberately. She approached slowly, hand trembling as she reached for the handle. The door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick, stale, and it smelled of old sweat and mildew. There were 5 plates on the floor of the van, each with dried remnants of food, cans of soda, a pack of cards, all positioned carefully, like someone had arranged them. There was no blood, no signs of violence, just presence, evidence that people had lived here. maybe for hours, maybe longer. In the back seat, Emily found one of Josh's sneakers. The laces were tied, the tongue bent like it had just been taken off. She picked it up and held it against her chest, tears finally breaking through. "He was here," she whispered. Mason stood at the other door, silent. He had found something too. On the inside of the van wall, scrawled in black marker, was a phrase, "Stay quiet or stay forever." He didn't say it out loud. They called the police from a payphone in town. Anonymous tip. Emily didn't want her name on the record. When officers finally arrived at the scene later that day, they cordoned off the area and brought in forensics. The town exploded. Headlines changed overnight. What had once been a missing persons case now had a location. The van, the belongings, the graffiti, the first real physical evidence since the boys vanished. But for Emily, it wasn't closure. It was confirmation. Josh had been there, alive at least for a while, and someone had kept him that way. The details the police released to the press were vague. "We've recovered a vehicle of interest," said the sheriff. "There is no evidence of foul play at this time." Emily almost laughed when she heard it. No foul play? What do you call 5 plates and a shoe in an abandoned van in the woods? Mason kept digging. He traced the vehicle's last known inspection and found that it hadn't been registered in over a year, meaning it was off the books, borrowed, stolen, or swapped. They had questions, but the answers weren't coming, not from the cops. That night, Emily replayed the audio from Josh's phone again and again. She thought about the clicking, the whisper, and now, the van. It was all connected. She opened her notebook and wrote a single question. At the top of a new page, who set the table? The neatness inside the van wasn't random. It was deliberate. Someone had prepared that space, maybe to hold them, maybe to feed them, maybe to watch them. The idea made her stomach churn. She didn't know which was worse, the thought of the boys being dragged into the forest by force, or the possibility they had gone willingly, lured. Later that week, Mason came to her with another lead. "I checked the property records near that trail," he said. "Guess who owns the land next to it?" Emily looked up, dread already crawling in. "Coach Daniels' cousin, registered 3 years ago under a shell company." The walls tightened around her. That wasn't coincidence. That was a link, a connection that proved the boys hadn't vanished. They had been taken, brought to a place familiar, hidden in plain sight. Emily circled Coach Daniels' name on the board again. This time, she drew a line straight to the forest. The police hadn't shared that detail. They were too busy controlling the narrative, too cautious to admit they'd overlooked something massive. But Emily didn't care about politics. She cared about Josh, about the others, and about the fact that somewhere in those woods, the truth had been buried. Not just the van, not just the belongings, but the decision to silence the pain of 5 families. That van was a message, and Emily had received it loud and clear. The woods weren't empty. They were full of secrets, and she was ready to tear them all down. The discovery of the van should have been the end of the mystery. For most people in Ridgefield, it was enough. Proof that something had happened, that the boys hadn't just vanished into the night on a whim. But for Emily, it wasn't a resolution. It was a beginning. The forest didn't just hide the past. It hinted at something deeper. The phrase scrawled inside the van, "Stay quiet or stay forever," looped in her mind like an unanswered question. Who had written it? Who was supposed to read it? And then another thought. What if the boys weren't the first? The question led her back to Mason. Over the next few days, they dove into public records, old newspaper archives, and local forums. They made a spreadsheet of every missing teen case from the last decade in their region. The filters were specific. Boys between 15 and 18 vanished without trace. No confirmed foul play. At first, the list was short, but as they expanded the radius to include counties that bordered Ridgefield, the pattern emerged. 3 disappearances over the last 5 years, all under similar circumstances. Different towns, different schools, but each boy was an athlete. Each vanished on a Friday night, and all of them had attended away games hours before they were last seen. Emily felt her stomach drop as she stared at the timeline. It wasn't a one-time tragedy. It was a pattern, a cycle. Someone had been watching, choosing, waiting. The realization turned her obsession into something else. Entirely fear. These weren't isolated events. They were coordinated. Someone had been doing this for years, and no one had noticed because the dots were never connected. She reached out to the families of those boys, not expecting much. Most numbers were disconnected, but then a woman picked up. Her name was Dana Willis. Her son Jordan disappeared 2 years ago after a football game in Benton. Emily introduced herself and explained what she was working on. There was a long pause. Then Dana said, "I've been waiting for this call." They met the next day in a small cafe outside of town. Dana looked exhausted. Her eyes had the same hollow stare Emily had seen in her mother's reflection too many times. She didn't want justice anymore. She just wanted to know. And what she told Emily chilled her to the bone. Jordan had complained for weeks before his disappearance that someone was following him after practice. At first, they thought he was paranoid. Then his cleats were found at the edge of a park he'd never go to. The police said he probably ran away, but Dana had found something else, a journal under his mattress. On the last page, written hastily in pencil, was one line. "He's watching us again. Same van." The word hit Emily like a hammer. Van, not a truck, not a car, a van, just like the one Josh and his friends disappeared in. They compared timelines. Jordan had vanished on November 12th, 2 years earlier. Almost the same date as Josh. Same night of the week. Same circumstances. The similarities were undeniable. Emily asked if Dana ever reported the journal to the police. She nodded. They said it wasn't enough, just a teenager with anxiety. The pain in her voice was sharp. They closed the case after 6 months. Emily made a copy of the journal page and added it to her growing ledger. Every new page made the whole story feel heavier. Mason dug further. He cross-referenced coaching staff across schools from those missing kids' teams. The name Coach Daniels appeared twice, as a visiting assistant coach in one game and as a volunteer observer in another. That shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. Daniels wasn't just a school figure, he was mobile. He had connections, and most importantly, he had proximity to all the boys. When they brought this to the police, they were met with blank stares and firm dismissals. "It's circumstantial," said the sheriff. "We can't open an investigation on theories." But Emily wasn't giving up. She took it to the press next. An anonymous email. A journalist named Brooke Simmons at a small independent paper picked it up. Within days, the headline exploded. "Are the Ridgefield Five part of a pattern?" The article detailed the similarities, the ignored warnings, the overlapping figures. Names were redacted, but the message was clear. These weren't isolated cases. And once that story was published, others began reaching out. A father in Missouri, a cousin in Oregon, whispered accounts of strange vans and unanswered phone calls. It was spreading. The town tried to ignore it. The school released a carefully worded statement about rumors harming the healing process. Coach Daniels was placed on administrative leave pending unrelated investigations. But the damage was done. Eyes were turning toward him. Emily watched the walls start to crumble. Daniels hadn't been just a coach. He'd been part of something, maybe the face of it. She didn't know how deep it went, but she knew it went beyond him. No one person could have done all of this alone. Then came the final piece. Mason found a transportation contract filed under the school district's old vendor registry. It listed a subcontractor called HT Logistics, a name no one recognized. But when Mason traced the business address, it led to a P.O. box, and the listed contact was Dale Harris. Emily didn't recognize it, but when they ran a photo check, the face that came up was unmistakable. It was Coach Daniels. Dale Harris was his real name. Everything else, Daniels, the school file, the references, was fabricated. Emily stared at the image, rage bubbling. "He's been hiding in plain sight," she whispered. Mason nodded. "Not hiding, operating." That was the moment she knew. This wasn't about 5 missing kids. It was about dozens. A system, a method, a predator with a history, and a network that helped him disappear into towns like Ridgefield. And if the police wouldn't stop him, then she would. The case wasn't just escalating, it was erupting, and Emily was done asking for permission. There's something about a name that makes people trust you. Coach Daniels sounded reliable, almost friendly. It was the name called over gym speakers, printed on game schedules, and whispered in parent-teacher conferences. But Dale Harris? That name didn't carry the same warmth. It didn't belong to Ridgefield. It belonged to someone else, someone who had gone to great lengths to erase the past and replace it with a lie. When Emily and Mason uncovered the truth, it didn't feel like a revelation. It felt like confirmation. The pieces were finally locking into place. Now they just needed proof that would break him. Mason's background check revealed more than a fake name. Dale Harris had a sealed juvenile record in another state. He'd changed towns at least 3 times over the last 15 years. Each time he surfaced near high schools or youth sports programs. His references were all unverifiable. His online presence was curated and minimal. No social media, no personal blogs, no digital footprint outside of school websites. It was a ghost trail, designed to keep him clean on paper. But he'd made one mistake, using a real name once to register a post office box for a business no one had heard of. That one slip gave them everything. Emily wanted to confront him. Every bone in her body screamed for it, but Mason held her back. "We need more," he said. "You only get one shot at this." So instead, they decided to watch him, follow him. They rented a car with tinted windows and parked across from his small rental home on the edge of town. He kept a routine: early mornings, late returns, short conversations with neighbors. But one night, around midnight, they saw something different. Daniels, or Harris, left the house wearing a dark hoodie and drove off, taking a route that led out of town toward the woods. They followed from a distance, headlights off. It was raining lightly, the road slick and narrow. He drove without hesitation, like someone who'd taken this path many times. After 15 minutes, he pulled into a clearing and disappeared behind a rusted gate. Emily and Mason stopped on the side of the road, hearts pounding. They couldn't follow him in, not yet. But now they had a location. They dropped a GPS pin and marked it on the map. It wasn't just the van anymore. It wasn't just theories. Now they had movement. They had intent. The next morning, Emily returned to the location, alone. Mason had begged her to wait, to be smart, but she couldn't. Something inside her knew time was running out. She parked the car half a mile away and hiked through the underbrush until she reached the gate. It was locked, but old. She slipped through a gap in the fencing and moved silently down a dirt path. What she saw made her stomach turn. A small, weathered cabin. No electricity, no mailbox, no signs of life except for the tire tracks leading to it. She approached slowly, every step a prayer that no one was home. Through a crack in the wooden door, she saw shelves, boxes, and photos. Dozens of them pinned to the wall, all boys, some smiling, some blurred, all labeled with dates and numbers. She took a picture with her phone and turned to leave, heart hammering. But then she heard it, the sound of footsteps behind the cabin. She ducked and ran, tripping over roots, branches slashing at her arms. She didn't stop until she reached the car. She didn't speak for hours after. That wall of faces would haunt her forever. Back home, Emily and Mason examined the photo. They recognized 2 of the boys, Josh and Eli. The rest were strangers. Different ages, different cities. The earliest date went back nearly 10 years. The numbers beside each face were cryptic, coded references maybe, or some kind of sequence. Mason enlarged one image and found a small logo in the corner, a school emblem from Illinois. That meant the network was even larger than they thought. This wasn't just Ridgefield's horror. It was happening across states, maybe the country. Daniels wasn't just hiding. He was hunting. Emily couldn't keep quiet anymore. She brought the photos to the FBI field office in the next city. She demanded to speak to someone in charge. When they asked how she got them, she told the truth. At first they hesitated, unauthorized entry, chain of evidence issues. But once they saw the wall of boys, everything changed. An agent took her aside and promised they would look into it. But Emily had heard promises before. She left the office with no sense of relief. She wasn't done, not until Daniels was exposed. 2 days later, Daniels vanished. His house was empty. No forwarding address, no contact. His phone disconnected. The school claimed they had no idea where he went. Emily knew better. He had been tipped off. Someone, somewhere, had warned him. She suspected someone in the system, maybe a cop, maybe a bureaucrat, maybe someone who had helped him cover tracks before. That betrayal stung deeper than anything. It meant he wasn't alone. It meant someone else was involved, protecting him. And that meant more kids still be in danger. Emily fell into silence for days, overwhelmed by the weight of it. Her wall of clues, now towering, felt more like a memorial than a map. But one night, while scrolling through old messages on Josh's phone, she found something new. A text from a number not saved in his contacts. Dated 3 days before the game, it read, "Don't trust him, watch the plays, it's all scripted." She stared at it for hours, decoding every word. Who had sent it? Another student? A whistleblower? And what did it mean? Scripted. It hit her suddenly. The game wasn't just a game, it was a staging ground, a controlled environment. The boys' movements, the van's timing, the crowd, it had all been planned. And Daniels was at the center. But who else had known? Who had turned a blind eye? Emily didn't have answers yet, but she had names. She had photos, she had dates, and above all, she had purpose. The man with 2 names had disappeared, but the truth was finally within reach, and she wasn't letting go. Not until the last secret was dragged out of the dark. The air in Ridgefield felt different the morning the tip came in. It was Officer Bentley who called Emily, his voice tight and low. "We got something," he said. A wildlife ranger spotted someone matching Daniel's description at a hunting cabin 5 miles off County Road 18. Emily didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bag, already packed for weeks, and called Mason. "It's time," she told him. "No more waiting. No more watching." She wasn't going to let him vanish again. The truth was no longer hidden. It was running, and she was going to chase it down. The authorities moved fast, but Emily and Mason moved faster. By the time law enforcement was organizing a perimeter, they were already on the trail. The forest was dense and silent, blanketed in a heavy fog that seemed to muffle every step. Emily's heart pounded in rhythm with her boots hitting the earth. She carried a printed copy of the photo from the cabin, the wall of boys, and gripped it tightly, as if it were a weapon. Mason held a flashlight in one hand and a handheld radio scanner in the other, tracking police chatter in real time. They reached the edge of the clearing just as officers were moving into position. The cabin looked the same as before, weathered wood, small windows, an ominous stillness surrounding it. But this time there was movement, a shadow at the back, slipping through the trees. "He's running!" Mason shouted. Everything exploded into motion. Officers yelled commands. Flashlights swung through the fog. Emily didn't think. She chased. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed, but she pushed harder. The shape ahead darted through brush, breaking branches, fast and desperate. It was him. Daniels, no, Harris, moved like a man who had been hunted before. He knew the terrain. He didn't look back. Emily stayed close. Driven by fury, by grief, by the memory of Josh's final words. Mason fell behind, calling her name, but she didn't stop. The forest blurred around her. All she saw was the figure ahead and the final stretch of truth she'd been chasing for 17 weeks. She reached for the pepper spray on her belt, readying herself for whatever would happen when she caught up. But then he disappeared. 1 second he was there, next, gone. She slid to a stop, eyes scanning wildly. Silence. Just trees and fog. Then a noise to her right. A rustle. A snap. And she turned just in time to see him emerge from behind a tree, arm raised. Emily ducked. The branch he swung grazed her shoulder. She stumbled, hit the ground, rolled, and came up spraying blindly. The mist hit him in the eyes and he screamed. She charged forward, knocking him off balance. They hit the dirt together, struggling, breath ragged, limbs flailing. His face was a mask of fury and confusion. "You shouldn't be here," he snarled. "You don't know what this is." Emily shoved the photo in his face. "I know enough," she yelled. "You took them." His eyes flicked to the image. Boys, dates, names, and something shifted. Not fear, not regret, satisfaction. "You don't understand," he said, voice low. "I didn't take them, I chose them." He said, "Who? I just made sure it happened." Emily froze. "Who?" she demanded. But he said nothing else, just smiled, that terrible, cold smile. A second later, 2 officers tackled him from behind. They cuffed him, read his rights, dragged him away. Emily stood over them, shaking, blood on her knuckles, knees torn from the forest floor. One of the officers offered her a blanket. She waved it away. She didn't need comfort. She needed answers. Mason caught up moments later, breathless. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "He's not the only one," she whispered. The words hung in the air, as heavy as the fog. She knew it now. Daniels was a servant, not a master. A piece, not the architect. At the station, Daniels was silent. No lawyer, no confession. Just a blank stare and a refusal to cooperate. But the evidence spoke louder. The wall of photos, the fingerprints in the van, the camera from the locker room. It was enough to hold him. The DA was preparing charges. But Emily didn't feel victorious. Something was missing. The way he spoke, he said who, gnawed at her. He wasn't acting alone. He was following instructions. That meant someone else had power. Someone else had names. Later that night, Emily stood alone in the woods where she'd tackled him. The fog had cleared, revealing the stars. She thought of Josh, of his final whisper, of the Morse code blinked from the van. SOS. He had known. He had fought. And now she had too. But the war wasn't over. Daniels was caught, but the pattern remained. The cycle, the system, the shadow that reached beyond Ridgefield. She felt it watching still, and she made a vow right there beneath the trees that she would finish what he started, even if it meant burning the whole thing down. The call came 3 days after Daniels' arrest. Emily was alone in her room when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She answered without hesitation. "Emily Carter?" the voice on the other end asked. "We need you to come down to Ridgefield PD. There's something you need to see." No explanation, no details, just a summons. She didn't ask questions. She grabbed her bag and told her mother, who just nodded, expression unreadable, drained. They drove in silence. Emily's fingers dug into the fabric of her jeans the entire way. She had waited 17 weeks for this moment, but now she wasn't sure she wanted to know. At the station, Officer Benley met her at the entrance. His face was paler than usual, lined with something that looked like grief or maybe guilt. "It's about the boys," he said. "We got a location." A crew had been searching the wooded land surrounding the cabin for days. It was only after Daniels' arrest that they received a map, anonymous, left in a mailbox behind the station. Hand-drawn, coordinates. Emily followed Benley to a conference room where a TV showed drone footage of a clearing deep in the forest. There, under the earth, were 5 freshly unearthed graves, one for each boy. Her knees gave out. The chair behind her caught her, but barely. She didn't cry, she couldn't. Her body was past tears. She just stared. One by one, the names were confirmed. Josh, Brandon, Tyler, Eli, Chris. Each grave had a wooden marker with initials carved in. Childlike scrawl. Inside each burial, the boys were dressed in their basketball uniforms. Their personal belongings were placed neatly beside them. Josh's watch, Brandon's headphones, Eli's wallet, Tyler's inhaler, Chris's lucky wristband. It was as if someone had tried to give them a respectful burial, but there was no respect in murder. The press swarmed. Bodies discovered in missing teen case. Coach connected to serial disappearances. The headlines screamed the truth the town had tried so long to ignore. Ridgefield became a name known across the country. Memorials were held. News vans lined the streets. But for Emily, none of it mattered. She didn't need cameras or candles. She needed to hold her brother one more time. She needed to ask him what really happened in those final hours. But that chance was gone. Now there were only pieces and questions. Daniel still wouldn't talk. Not a word. Not even when confronted with the bodies. But then, a slip. During a routine check in his cell, he was found scribbling in the margins of a Bible. Numbers, names, dates. The list included Josh and the others, but also 6 more names Emily didn't recognize. She handed it to Mason, who started researching immediately. Within hours, they found one. Missing teen from Iowa, last seen leaving a baseball game. Another from Nevada. The pattern extended far beyond Ridgefield. Daniel's wasn't the end. He was a chapter in a book no one wanted to finish reading. Emily stood at Josh's grave on a cold morning with no cameras around, no press releases, no police, just her, a folding chair, and a note in her pocket. She read it quietly. "You were right. You didn't mess up. They did, and I'll never stop until the last one is found." She placed the note inside a mason jar and buried it at the base of the grave. It wasn't closure. There was no such thing. But it was something, a marker, a promise. Mason approached her hours later with news. "There's a name that keeps popping up," he said, "connected to a non-profit that sponsors youth sports tournaments across the country. The same name is on rental contracts for the vans used in 3 of the disappearances." He handed her a printout. The name on it wasn't familiar. Not to her, but it would be. Emily folded it into her coat pocket. "We follow it," she said. "Everywhere it leads." Mason nodded. They weren't done. Not yet. The town would move on eventually. Another scandal would replace theirs. The pain would fade for everyone except the families. Except Emily. For her, this wasn't a story that ended. It was a story that began with a lie and continued because no one asked the right questions. She had asked. And now, she would keep asking until there were no more graves, until there were no more boys taken, until someone finally answered for everything. On the walk back to her car, Emily whispered a line she had been holding inside since the day the van disappeared. "You didn't want to be remembered, but someone always remembers." She didn't look back. The forest, the graves, the silence, they were behind her now. Ahead was something worse, but also something true, and Emily Carter was ready to face it. If this story moved you like it moved me, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts below. My name is Erlen, and this is Emotional Journey, where we bring you real stories that leave a mark. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, someone who would never forget the faces of those 5 boys, because stories like these deserve to be remembered.